It is time to answer the biggest Final Fantasy X-2 question of all time. When did Lulu and Waka get married? Seriously, why didn't they invite us? We are talking about the timeline of Final Fantasy X-2, as it is described in the Final Fantasy X-2 Japanese-only Ultimania. To be clear though, it's not this exact Ultimania. The information is in the last mission Ultimania, which I don't have. But there is a translation online, and I will link to that below. Now we're gonna learn all of the burning questions about how all this stuff happened between the span of 2 years. By the way, I actually think it's impossible for this to happen in the span of 2 years. I think the main reason they decided to do that was to keep Yuna young, because these Japanese people have an issue with people aging, I think. So Yuna has to be 19 in order to appeal to the demographic that they're marketing toward. Now, let's talk about the timeline. Here is the post-Final Fantasy X, pre-Final Fantasy X-2 timeline as it is laid out in the Ultimania from the last mission. This timeline is going to be broken up into 4 categories. These 4 categories are the events that took place directly after Final Fantasy X, events that took place 6 months, approximately half a year after Final Fantasy X, the events that happened 1 year after Final Fantasy X, and then the events that happened 2 years after Final Fantasy X, meaning directly before Final Fantasy X-2. After we go through all of these events, I am then going to give my thoughts on this timeline and expand on it a little bit. Immediately after Final Fantasy X, Spira's eternal calm begins. Many groups begin to dissolve at this time. Brother and Buddy discover the airship named Celsius. Trema closes down the training facility in the Calmlands. And then finally, the depowered Yevon priests begin to motion to put forward the truth about Yevon. Those are the events that happen right away. So that's in a very narrow span of time. Now we're going to talk about what happened approximately 6 months later, about half a year after the events of Final Fantasy X. Half a year after the events of Final Fantasy X, Sphere Hunters begin to appear. Waka and Lulu get married 6 months after the events of Final Fantasy X. I guess that was a very short engagement period. Trema establishes the New Yevon Party and begins monopolizing the collection of spheres. 1 year later, Nuge becomes the founder of the Youth League. Trema enters the mausoleum of Saint Pavel. After this, he disappears and destroys the spheres he collects. Kamari becomes the elder of the Ronso tribe. The Youth League begins building the port of Kilika. The New Yevon's second-generation chief ascends to power, and his son is inaugurated as praetor. Gipple forms the Machine faction. Brother becomes a sphere hunter, and he is the founder of the Gullwings. Now let's talk about the events that happens 2 years later. What happens 2 years later is the events of the Eternal Calm. Riku shows Yuna the Journey Start sphere that Kamari has found. Then Yuna leaves Besaid. Yuna joins the Gullwings. In New Yevon, the party chief and praetor falls from power, and Baralai is inaugurated as the new praetor. After reading this timeline, what is there to really make of this? Most of the events take place approximately 1 year after the events of Final Fantasy X. Sphere Hunters emerge approximately 6 months later. Immediately after Final Fantasy X, the airship Celsius is discovered. Lulu and Waka have an incredibly short engagement period, and they get married pretty much right away. Though I think that is actually completely understandable that they would get married so quickly, because when you experience the trauma of Final Fantasy X, you realize that life is short and you should just be together. And while we learn that Kamari becomes the elder of the Ronso tribe approximately 1 year later, I would have loved to learn the events that happened prior to Ronso becoming an elder. For example, constructing the statue of Yuna with the big horn. Also, immediately after the events of Final Fantasy X, the Yevon priests then put forth the truth, and everyone becomes awakened to the new reality. I could see how things would shift rather quickly in Yevon. In this search for meaning, sphere hunters emerge rather quickly. It doesn't talk at all about what Yuna is doing during this time. I guess she's hanging out in Besaid for 2 years in her regular clothes, being her regular Yuna, until Riku shows up 2 years later, and then Yuna has a complete transformation. When we see Yuna in the beginning of Final Fantasy X-2, that is the beginning of her new look and attitude. Let me know what you think of this timeline. And as a reminder, I stream 2 days a week, on Wednesday and Friday, and I hope to see you in one of my streams. We've been having a lot of fun doing the Creature Creator in Final Fantasy X-2, and I'm thinking of playing some other games at some point, so let me know if you're interested in that. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!